Before we begin, take a moment to settle into a comfortable position, allowing your body to rest in a way that feels natural and effortless. There is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to go, and nothing you need to hold onto right now. If your eyes are open, you can let them close gently, or simply soften your focus and allow the world around you to fade into the background. Take a slow breath in through your nose and then release it quietly, letting your shoulders relax as you exhale. The day is over. Whatever has been weighing on your thoughts can be set aside for now, knowing it will still be there tomorrow if you need it. Tonight is only for rest. As you continue to breathe slowly and comfortably, you may notice the way the bed supports you or the chair beneath you, holding your body without effort. There is no need to adjust or move unless you feel like it. Just allow yourself to be still. This story is meant to be listened to without effort or expectation. You do not need to follow every detail or remember every word. If your thoughts drift, that is perfectly fine. The story will continue whether you are awake or asleep. In the quiet moments between sentences, you may feel your breathing deepen, your muscles soften, and your mind begin to slow in its own time. If sleep comes before the story ends, let it take you. If you remain awake, simply listen, without judgment or anticipation. Now, as the night grows quieter around you, allow yourself to relax just a little more. The story will now begin. The sound always came at exactly 3 in the morning, and Daniel no longer needed to check the clock to know that it was coming, because his body had learned the rhythm long before his mind accepted it. Sleep would loosen its grip on him moments beforehand, easing him upward from dreams he never remembered, and his eyes would open in the dark with a quiet certainty that the night had reached its deepest point. His breathing would slow, his thoughts would empty, and then, as predictably as a tide responding to the moon, the sound would arrive. It was never loud enough to be described as a bang, nor sharp enough to be called a knock in the usual sense. It was dull, restrained, and strangely respectful of the silence around it, as though whatever made the sound understood the value of being heard, without drawing attention from anything else. 3 impacts, a pause, then 3 more. Each one landed with the same measured pressure, neither hurried nor hesitant, leaving behind an echo that lingered just long enough for Daniel to wonder if it had truly happened before fading back into the vast quiet of the house. The first night, he dismissed it without effort. The townhouse was old, older than the city records claimed, and Daniel had lived in enough aging buildings to know that they carried their histories in sound. Pipes complained, wood shifted, walls breathed when the temperature dropped too quickly. At 3 in the morning, when the world was quiet enough to amplify every minor movement, those sounds could easily become unsettling. The second night, he woke just before the sound again, and although unease crept into his thoughts, he still told himself the same story. Coincidence, pattern-seeking, a tired mind inventing significance where none existed. By the third night, the explanation no longer held. The sound was identical in rhythm, spacing, and tone, as though it had been practiced and perfected. It did not wander through the walls or echo from different directions. It came from the same place, at the same time, with the same intent. And Daniel began to feel, in a way he could not articulate, that the sound was not a byproduct of the house, but an action performed within it, by something that knew when he was awake. Daniel lived alone, which made the nights worse and the days feel strangely unreal by comparison. The townhouse sat at the far end of a narrow street, where the city seemed to hesitate before giving way to quieter neighborhoods, the kind where street lights stood farther apart, and the absence of traffic allowed sounds to travel farther than they should. There were neighbors, but none close enough to share walls, and no upstairs or downstairs apartments to account for unfamiliar noises. The house itself was narrow and tall, its rooms stacked efficiently, as though designed to leave as little unused space as possible. During daylight hours, the place felt ordinary enough to soothe him. Sunlight filled the living room in the late morning, warming the wooden floors and illuminating the thin layer of dust that always seemed to return no matter how often he cleaned. The kitchen hummed quietly with the sound of the refrigerator. Outside, he could hear distant cars, birds settling on power lines, the muffled rhythm of a world that continued to exist beyond his walls. But at night, especially after midnight, the house felt different. Not hostile, attentive. It was on the fourth night, when sleep abandoned him completely, that Daniel finally decided to move. He lay in bed with his eyes open, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between his breaths while waiting for the sound he knew would come. When it did, his muscles tensed automatically. But instead of remaining still, he swung his legs over the side of the mattress and sat up. The room felt colder than it should have. He reached for his phone, turned on the flashlight, and let the narrow beam carve a path through the darkness as he stepped into the hallway. The sound had stopped, leaving behind a silence that pressed in on him from all sides, heavy and expectant. As he took another step forward, the sound returned. Closer. Not louder, but nearer, as though distance itself were being shortened. Daniel followed it slowly, the beam of his phone sliding over the walls and floor, catching on familiar details that suddenly felt foreign in the half-light. The hallway ended in a closed door, one he rarely opened and thought about even less during the day. The spare room. The sound came again. 3 impacts, measured and deliberate, from inside the room. Daniel stopped several feet away, his heart beating loudly enough that he worried it might drown out whatever came next. He had never liked the spare room, though he had never given that discomfort much thought. It was smaller than the others, with a single narrow window that faced a brick wall just beyond the property line, allowing almost no natural light inside. Whenever he opened the door during the day, the room felt unused in a way that went beyond its lack of furniture, as though it were not merely empty, but waiting. The doorknob was cold when he touched it, colder than the rest of the house, and as his fingers closed around it, the sound stopped. The silence that followed felt intentional. Daniel waited, listening, holding his breath until his chest ached, but nothing else came. Eventually, he stepped back, released the doorknob, and retreated to the living room, where he sat on the couch with all the lights on until the sky outside began to pale with the approach of dawn. He did not open the door. In the morning, with sunlight filling the hallway and the rational part of his mind reasserting itself, Daniel almost convinced himself that the entire experience had been exaggerated by fear and fatigue. Almost. When he opened the spare room door, the air inside felt stale, untouched, and the room looked exactly as it always had. But when he examined the inside of the door more closely, he saw them. 3 faint indentations pressed into the wood from the inside. They were shallow, but unmistakable. That night, Daniel left every light in the house on. The sound came anyway. At exactly 3 in the morning, just as it always had, but this time, the rhythm was wrong. Instead of 3 impacts in quick succession, there was only 1. Then a pause, then another. Each sound was slower than before, separated by long stretches of silence that forced Daniel to wait, breath held for whatever would come next. The pauses felt deliberate, as though something were listening for his reaction before continuing. The sound was no longer coming from the spare room, it was in the hallway. Daniel lay frozen in bed as the noise moved, the dull impact followed by a soft dragging sound, as though something were being pulled along the floor with careful restraint. The progression was unhurried, patient, and terrifying in its certainty. It stopped directly outside his bedroom door. 3 soft knocks followed, each one closer together than the last. From the outside, Daniel did not scream. He did not move. He lay there with his eyes open, staring at the dark outline of the door, convinced that if he made a sound, if he acknowledged what stood on the other side, something irreversible would happen. Eventually, the knocking stopped, but sleep did not return. By morning, Daniel felt as though he had aged years overnight. His reflection in the bathroom mirror startled him, and when he tilted his head to rinse his mouth, he noticed dark marks along his neck. Faint at first, then unmistakable. Finger-shaped bruises. He touched them lightly, his skin sensitive beneath his fingertips, and tried to remember how they could have gotten there. No memory surfaced. The night was a blank stretch of fear and waiting, with nothing in between. That day, Daniel began to measure the house. He didn't tell himself why he was doing it, only that he needed to understand the space he was living in. He measured walls, counted steps, traced the outline of each room, comparing interior dimensions to the exterior shape of the building. The numbers didn't match. The spare room extended farther than the house should allow. The hallway leading to it seemed longer inside than it appeared from outside, as though space itself bent slightly in that direction, accommodating something that did not belong. Driven by a sense of dread he could no longer suppress, Daniel pulled at the carpet in the spare room, peeling it back inch by inch, until his fingers brushed against wood that did not feel like flooring. A small door was hidden beneath the boards. Old, rough, scratched. 3 deep gouges marred its surface. That night, Daniel sat in the hallway and waited. When his phone ticked over to 3, the house grew impossibly still, as though even the walls were holding their breath. The door beneath the floor shook. 3 knocks came from below. And then a voice answered him when he asked who was there. It spoke his name in his own voice, and with it came the memory he had buried so deeply that he had convinced himself it no longer existed. The road at night, the rain, the headlights, the impact, the sound. The voice did not accuse him. It did not threaten. It only asked to be remembered. When the neighbors heard the thud that followed, they called the police. When the police arrived, they found Daniel alive, but unconscious, lying in the hallway of a house that no longer contained a spare room, a hidden door, or any sign of disturbance. Daniel moved out a week later. He sleeps somewhere else now. But every morning, at exactly 3, he wakes up, and somewhere nearby, something knocks.